Happy smile and ready when you are.
Hello everyone, this is Undiga, the Niger fertility lawyer. In the previous video, we had talked about the interactions between the legal systems the interactions between the laws of the treatment country and the destination or residence country. Keeping with that same theme on international surrogacy, we'd like to make a step back and ask ourselves the question, what is driving this trend of international surrogacy? Why are people leaving one country to go to another country to engage in fertility treatments? Before we begin to think about all the other implications that flow from that choice. Now, one thing, there are quite a few centers, there are quite a few countries in the world that seem to be attracting people who want to go into fertility treatment, who want to do international surrogacy. And Nigeria has become one of the centers on the African continent that's attracting a lot of intending parents, mostly from the Nigerian diaspora, but increasingly nationals of other countries are coming to Nigeria to take advantage of the fertility treatments available to have children through surrogacy. And it's very important to understand the reason why this is happening. One of the first things that we have to acknowledge is the fact that economic factors are driving this trend, are driving these choices, are driving making people decide to leave the countries where they live, often very developed countries in Europe and in the US and in Australia. And these are making them return to countries that are less developed than the countries where they live. One of the things we have to think about is, why are people who live in very often very developed countries leaving those countries to go somewhere else to have their international fertility or international surrogacy treatments? And one of the biggest reasons why that is happening is costs. And costs has very many different dimensions. The first dimension of cost is the fact that in many developed countries, surrogacy is very expensive. The fertility treatments are very expensive. And in these other countries where people seem to be drawn to, including Nigeria, you can have exactly the same treatment for very significantly lower costs. So that is the cost of the treatment itself. That's one factor. Another factor is the amount of money that needs to be paid to get a surrogate services. And that is significantly lower in many of those countries than in the developed countries where these intending parents are coming from. Another reason is also, very often intending parents have been told that they would need a gamete donor, either an egg donor or a sperm donor. And if you belong to an ethnic minority in the country where you live, getting an egg donor or sperm donor might be very difficult and might also be very expensive. And so moving your treatment to a country where you would find a bigger supply of the gamete donors of the ethnicity that you want might be a reason why you might decide to have your treatment, your surrogacy treatment, in one country instead of another country. And when you put all these costs together, the cost of getting a gamete donor, the cost of the treatment, the cost of the surrogate, the cost of getting the surrogate payments, you're able to begin to consider the cost of getting a surrogacy agency to manage the process for you. If you put all those costs together, you begin to find out that the treatment works out as significantly cheaper than it would be if it was done in the home country or the destination country of the intending parents. And these are some of the reasons why people seem to be moving all over the world to look for places where they can have their fertility treatments. And very often, the costs of the treatment or the total cost of the treatment seems to be the singular most important driving factor. For some reason, because the costs seem to be significantly less and more accessible than what they would obtain in their home country. A lot of intending parents are not really taking into consideration the other practicalities and the difficulties of moving to a different country for your fertility treatment. And that is a bit worrying because they only seem to consider those things after the child has been conceived or after the child has been born, and they begin to think about what process they need to go through to remove the child from the treatment country to their home country. And so these are some of the things that it's very advisable to begin to ask yourself questions about very early in the process before you decide to move to another country. Is your choice of treatment country being driven primarily by cost? Or are you have you taken into consideration all the other broader implications of moving your treatment away from the country where you live and to a different country? Now, in Nigeria, we seem to be getting a lot of traffic from abroad of intending parents who are linked to Nigeria in one way. Maybe they are Nigerian by descent, or they have and family members, or maybe a parent or a grandparent who are Nigerian, and it makes them feel psychologically a little more safer to come and have their treatment in Nigeria. But that alone in itself shouldn't be the only consideration. So my advice would be, before you decide to take your fertility treatment from one country to another, take a look at the whole picture and all the implications of having your treatment that way, and don't allow your decision to be driven only by costs. Take care.